Good morning again, everybody.
Good morning.
Thank you, April. She kind of does a great job and then does the drop the microphone thing and takes off. I noticed. I think they're doing Tai Chi with the kids today. So I liked your question, though. Did anyone get a response for themselves to childlike versus childish, a difference? You can come up. Oh, well, don't keep it to yourselves. What'd you get? Anybody?
Innocence.
Innocence. All right. Yeah, anybody else?
Awe.
I'm sorry?
Awe.
Awe. Ooh, I like awe. Kathleen? Finding dandelions in the grass on your tummy. Did I get all that correctly? Thank you, JR.
Enthusiasm.
Enthusiasm, yes. Judy?
Wonderment.
Wonderment. I love that. Good. Well, I like
Playful.
Mark. Playful. Good. Good. Larry?
Curiosity.
Curiosity. Mischief. Ooh. Oh, we all need a little mischief every now and then. I think even Willy Wonka said that. A little mischief now and then is important to the wisest man. Something like that. Yes. Spontaneity. Yes. And we're all childlike. And anyone here ever childish? You know, sometimes I'm a perfect being of awe and joy, and sometimes I'm a spoiled brat. Right? Sometimes I'm willing and playful, and sometimes I'm willing to cry if I don't get my way. There's all of those aspects of being. I wanted to begin this morning by sharing from the Tao Te Ching, which is our book of the month. And this book of ancient Chinese wisdom tells us that the great Tao, which we can interpret as meaning spirit, flows everywhere. All things are born from it, yet it doesn't create them. It pours itself into its work, yet it makes no claim. It nourishes infinite worlds, yet it doesn't hold on to them. Since it is merged with all things and hidden in our hearts, it can be called humble. Since all things vanish into it and it alone endures, it can be called great. It isn't aware of its greatness, thus it is truly great. This poem of Lao Tzu speaks to me of the nature of God, that the nature of the divine is like this, especially in lines such as, it nourishes infinite worlds, yet it doesn't hold on to them. You know, the spirit is something that holds on to everything without touching anything. You know, it doesn't need to be first, but it's always there at the foundation of being if we're willing to open our hearts and our minds to experience it. These words also remind me, however, the nature of a child. When I hear lines such as, it pours itself into its work, yet it makes no claim, or all things are born from it, yet it doesn't create them. That's something beautiful about a child to me, is it's born of the world, and yet in a sense it gives birth to the world as well, through its fresh perspective, his or her way of seeing things. And I think of the child too when I read this line, it isn't aware of its greatness, thus it is truly great. A child can be innocent and humble and of course beautiful. And I think many mystics and teachers throughout the ages, they tell us that the nature of God is much like the nature of a child. And to be able to connect with the true nature of our being, it is required of us to be more childlike. A member of our congregation, an elder in our church, recently said to me that a new child had been born in the family. And she said, my new teacher. I really liked that. The Tao Te Ching tells us that he who is in harmony with the Tao is like a newborn child. And Jesus famously told us that the way to enter into the kingdom of heaven is to be like the little children. Not like an evangelical fundamentalist, not like a strong business person, not like a self-righteous politician, but like a child. Maybe harder to do for many of us these days than we might think. One of the great joys of my life over the last 6 years is getting the opportunity to be a dad to someone, to be a dad to a young boy when he was 5 and now he's 11, and it's really helped me give birth to the child in myself again in a really great way. We were even driving by the sign. He said, "Childlike versus childish." I don't see a difference between those things. But I love getting to do certain things with him. I love asking him questions that he doesn't know he's not supposed to have the answer to yet, and then hearing him answer those things with clarity and with great articulation. I love doing things with him that I loved to do as a kid, jumping in the ocean, going to amusement parks, baseball. I love introducing and getting to reintroduce myself to things that I wouldn't do anymore if he wasn't around, especially eating stuff. I love getting to eat Cinnamon Toast Crunch again, and different flavors of ice cream again, and even going to McDonald's every once in a while. The consequence is a few more pounds for me, but I hope that it's worth it. But it's so beautiful to get to see or share in his perspective, because he's definitely a great teacher of mine. I like something an author by the name of William Martin said in a book he wrote called The Parents' Tao Te Ching. He says, "Do not ask your children to strive for extraordinary lives. Such striving may seem admirable, but it is the way of foolishness. Help them instead to find the wonder and the marvel of an ordinary life. Show them the joy of tasting tomatoes, apples, and pears. Show them how to cry when pets and people die. Show them the infinite pleasure in the touch of a hand, and make the ordinary come alive for them. The extraordinary will take care of itself." It's a great line for parenting children, but it's a great line for ourselves too. Of when did we find ourselves in this position where life wasn't special enough the way it is, that we had to get on this path of not being enough to try and find something to make us more whole or make us more grand. To be truly childlike is to see the magic and the enchantment in your very life today. It's to not have so many definitions about things and live more present to them, so that we're listening to who we are in relationship to this amazing thing called life around us. Lao Tzu tells us, he says, "Throw away holiness and wisdom, and people will be 100 times happier. Throw away morality and justice, and people will do the right thing. Throw away industry and profit, and there won't be any thieves. If these aren't enough, just stay at the center of the circle and let all things take their course." As we mentioned, if you were here last week, the Tao Te Ching sounds like nonsense to a lot of people, but when you see that the idea is a faith in nature, the idea that nature has everything it needs already within it, including the great qualities and virtues of being, and when we learn to resume living at one with our true nature, great things come forward. And so there's something to be said for justice as a human construct and morality as a human construct, but the idea is that they're already there. Sometimes speaking about them so much makes them something that there aren't. And often as parents, we often think that our job is to teach our kids right from wrong, when in reality they teach us what's right and what's wrong. When we're having a childish moment of being selfish for ourselves, or acting too moody, or not having enough fun, a child is a great compass for a parent to show if you're on track with the morality and the way of being yourself. Last week as well, I invited us to think about a choice that was pending for us, maybe even a nagging one. And I'll ask today of thinking about a choice and asking yourself, how could I be more childlike in relationship to this situation before me? Maybe maturity isn't all that it's cracked up to be. Maybe there is a way to approach this circumstance with a greater amount of awe, or innocence, or playfulness, or like a child finding dandelions in the yard. For all this praising of children, however, I do think there's another side to this as well. Jesus said to be like little children to enter the kingdom of God, but he did not say, "Blessed are those who throw temper tantrums in the grocery stores, for they shall see God." Nor did Jesus say, blessed is he who refuses to finish his dinner, for the kingdom shall be his. The idea being that there's childlikeness to honor, but there's also childishness that we don't always want to honor, and it can be cute in kids, but when we carry it on as adults, not so cute, is it? To be childlike is to be filled with awe, love, a sense of faith and innocence and trust. To be childish is to be immature. It's to be selfish. It's to, at times, even be manipulative. Anyone ever get childish here? You know, when April tells me I'm acting like a child, it's not a compliment. You know? My friend Charlie McClung once observed about kids that they seem to have no sense of past or future. There's only now or not now. And we can sometimes find ourselves in that place, and it's great to live in the present moment, but the past and future can help us sometimes, because it's that sense of now, not now, that causes the temper tantrum in the grocery store. Even if you say to your child, well, you know, you have this toy at home, we'll play with it then. Well, that's a not now moment. That's not going to be okay. Not now is bad. Or if you explain that you're going to have dessert 10 minutes from now, there's still that not now sense of being. And so it's an important thing to learn in our children to help teach them a sense of time, yet it's something we carry on in ourselves, because I find that many of us are trying to balance, whether we're aware of it or not, that childlikeness and that childishness. And I can tell you in my own life, I'm often swinging between those pendulums of thinking that I need to be the specialist one, of not being willing to share, of needing to get my way, of thinking that I'm the most important, and living in a state of gracefulness, living in a state of play, recognizing that fun is number one compared to all this other stuff that we concern ourselves with at other times. I like something that Lao Tzu says about spirituality, because this difference between childlikeness and childishness, I think, shows up most in our spirituality. He says, when they lose their sense of awe, people turn to religion. An interesting thought. It sounds like a criticism, but I don't think he means it that way. I think the way of awe is the childlike spirituality. It's seeking that direct experience of life. It's seeking to honor what life is and then to live in accordance with it in our hearts, recognizing that the rest of the stuff isn't as important. A childish spirituality is that spirituality that says that it's all about me. It's all about a mommy-daddy God. Please give me my way. It's all about building our own sandbox and saying, I can decide who comes in it and who can go, to that other sandbox probably down below, or whatever it may be. It's a controlling type of spirituality that can come forth and can really haunt some of us at times as well. I think it also shows up in our prayer life. I don't know how many of you get our church newsletter, but I shared the story this month of being at a roulette wheel and putting on some bets. I got $100 worth of chips, and I put them on my lucky numbers, a little childish there. But I put them out there, and I think the first time my number landed, so I was excited, but the second time it didn't. And then I kept playing, and I was looking around, and I realized there were 4 or 5 other people at the table that they, just like me, were praying too. We were all, once we realized that telekinetics wasn't quite working for us, we couldn't get the ball to drop on the right number, we started appealing to God. And I was saying my prayers and thinking, I don't think anyone else here is a minister. I should probably have the right in consciousness to be granted the win of having my number be landed upon. God bless the other people there around the circle, but I was the most spiritual one. And so God had led me in this moment to be at this divine, right, perfect time to receive the jackpot that I wanted God to know that I so deserved. And so as I'm sitting there saying my prayer as the wheel is spinning, there is a deeper part of me that's reminding me to choose the good, to choose to live in joy, to not be so worried or so caught up on the manifestation that I'm trying to make take place, but to simply be at one with the nature of who I am. I don't remember anymore whether I won or not after some of those prayers, because it didn't really matter, because I was practicing a childish spirituality. Not that there's anything wrong with telling the divine exactly how we want it to show up and exactly what it can look like, but when we put the demands on God, if you don't give me this, I'm going to throw a fit. I'm going to deny my true nature. Don't we do that sometimes? We don't get our way and we sacrifice ourselves. But I think there's greater wisdom in choosing the joy, choosing the good. Put as many chips out on the table as you'd like, but don't be so attached to them. Live from that place of love in you, and then you will be practicing a childlike spirituality. A childish spirituality is a me spirituality. I remember an old story about a man who buys a farm for he and his family. It's an ancient Chinese story. And he does really well. Eventually, his wife passes away, and he's a widower, but he watches his son work in the fields every day. He sits on the porch. And one day, the son isn't too happy about this. He keeps looking over at Grandpa on the porch and saying, here I am doing all the work, and what does he do? I need to feed myself and my family, and this guy's just feeding off the land. So he decided that he had enough, and so he builds a coffin for his father, and he rolls it up to him one day, and he says, hop in. And the grandpa, he realizes what's going on, and he does. He gets in there, and yes, this is kind of like a Looney Tune, too, so you get to see it that way. And he's got whatever they called dollies back then, and he rolls his dad up to the hillside, and he's about to throw him over when he hears a knock on the coffin. And he says, what is it, Dad? And he says, why don't you just take me out of the box and throw me over? Your kids might need it later. I always like that story because it's an example not only of the wisdom of the father, but it speaks to how we can behave like the son in the story sometimes, when we don't see everyone else's part in our lives, when we start trying to put ourselves first in that childish kind of way. One of the hardest things to teach our children, because it's something we learn through experience and not through the rational type of lessons, is the contradictions of life. Because there are so many. I wish there weren't contradictions in life, but there are. We want to teach our children to be good, and that good things happen when you work hard and you're a good person, yet we want them to know that life seems to not always be fair, and that sometimes bad things happen to good people. We want our kids to know that they are loved and they are safe, yet we also want them to be very, very careful out there in the world. And it's a hard thing to tell them that these can be equally true, that they're on different degrees of perspective and understanding. Even in our own church, we recognize, and we do this in our congregation, but in our youth church every week, we realize that the most important thing to teach our kids is how special they are, that they're unique divine expressions of God, that they're perfect, that they're whole, that they're complete. And yet we have to be so careful teaching this lesson because we have to make sure it goes to their hearts and not to their heads.
Yeah.
Because if you're not careful, you can think that you're so perfect and special that it means you're better than everybody else. That it means that you're invincible and can get away with anything that you want. When what we want our kids to learn is that they're a unique expression, and so is all of life around them. And that when they learn to live in harmony with the glory within themselves, they not only see it, but they can bring it about in others. And that's how we bring about the healing and clarity that we want in the world, and when times are tough, within our own lives. Lao Tzu says, true perfection seems imperfect, yet it is perfectly itself. True fullness seems empty, yet it is fully present. True straightness seems crooked. True wisdom seems foolish. True art seems artless. The master allows things to happen. She shapes events as they come. She steps out of the way and lets spirit speak for itself. Let's say a prayer for whatever's going on out there. It reminds me well of something that Shunryu Suzuki said. He said, each of you is perfect, but you could all use a little improvement. It's a good lesson for embracing the childlikeness in our lives. So we can talk about how we can face the choices in our lives with a more childlike way. But can any of us call ourselves out on acting childish in relationship to a choice that's forthcoming for us? And maybe clinging to things, working out a certain way, and perhaps not listening to other people involved, perhaps a lack of willingness to have something better than even we think possibly turn out. When we can better embrace the childlike nature of who we are, which is always more fun anyways, not only can we live more at peace, but we often give ourselves the creative ability to better handle the situations that are before us, even while we're going through them. The Tao Te Ching tells us, colors blind the eye, sounds deafen the ear, flavors numb the taste, thoughts weaken the mind, desires wither the heart. The master observes the world, but trusts his inner vision. He allows things to come and go. His heart is open as the sky. And it's a good place to close to ask ourselves, those of us whose hearts aren't as open as the sky, is how can we get to that point again? How can we reach that level of trust, that level of intimacy, that level of living with faith in our lives again? Because for many of us, something took away that innocence. Something damaged that faith. Something challenged that ability to live in intimacy with life around us. But now that we're adults, we can really be kids. We can have the discernment. We can have the clarity. We can set the boundaries or the guidelines that allow us to live with a heart as open as the sky. To no longer allow us to live in the childhood fears that hold us back, but to live again from that place of love that knows we live in a world that, although isn't always safe, there's certainly nowhere else that we can be. So it's up to us to play, to create, to be there for ourselves, and to stand up for those around us. So just taking a prayerful moment in closing, I just invite us to open our hearts and minds to that deeper experience of life itself, honoring that divine nature in each and every one of us that doesn't call us to do anything, but to simply be at one with what it is, finding the harmony and the truth of our own flow. I know that it guides us, it inspires us, and it carries us onward. Amen. Thank you very much, everybody. Thanks for being here this morning. Happy Sunday.